From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Thank you for being here. I'm Joel Achenbach with the Washington Post with Joseph Mazur, the author of this fabulous book, Fluke. The subtitle is The Math and Myth of Coincidence. And we're going to talk about coincidences and flukes and serendipity and things like that. And we're just going to shoot the breeze, and then we're going to throw it up to questions. Please ask whatever's on your mind. I promise you that if you read the book, you'll be better at Vegas. You're going to win the lottery. I mean,
wait a second. I don't promise that.
You're learning about the magic numbers, okay? No, actually the other way around. But Dr. Mazur, who has a Ph.D. in mathematics from MIT, is a professor at Marlboro College in Vermont, professor emeritus. And he's written a whole bunch of books. One is called What's Luck Got to Do with It, which is actually about gambling. He's written The Motion Paradox. Subtitle is The 2,500-Year-Old Puzzle Behind the Mysteries of Time and Space. Okay, so he's got that figured out, okay? All right, he's very smart guy. He's in time, space. I think he could answer any question. He's written a book called Euclid in the Rainforest, Discovering Universal Truth in Logic and Math, and a book called Enlightening Symbols. So he is a, Joe, can I call you
yes,
Joe?
Please,
Dr. Mazur?
please.
Okay. You call me Mr. Achenbach.
Okay.
He's a popularizer of mathematics. He's written these books so that people could understand math and probabilities and I guess risk analysis and just how the world works a little bit better. Let's talk about this book, Fluke, and you have a whole bunch of stories in here that are about amazing coincidences, and you explain how it's possible for these things to happen. Well, let's talk about the famous Anthony Hopkins coincidence where he came across it was the book, The Girl from
Petrovka.
Yeah. Okay, tell that story.
Yeah, okay. The story goes like this, and this is partly from Anthony Hopkins' version. The story is that back in 1976, when Anthony Hopkins was not very well known, a fledgling actor, and he got the part in a movie called The Girl from Petrovka. And he wanted to get the novel. He had the script, he wanted a novel, and read the novel. Now, the novel was an American edition of the novel, but it had not come out in Britain at the time, and he lived in Britain and near London. He decided to go one day to search for a copy of the novel. Now, this is 1976. There's no Amazon. You can call bookstores, but you really have to do some legwork to find books at that point. So he spends a day searching hundreds of bookstores, according to him, and finds no book that satisfies him. And he comes home. He comes back to the tube stop that he generally uses to get back.
The tube is what they call the subway over there.
The underground, they call it underground.
Okay.
I'm not sure the reason for that, but anyhow. He sits on a bench, and for a few minutes he's sitting on the bench, and he just happens to notice some other things on the bench, and among the other things is a book, and he moves over to search what this book is, and the book is the exact book, The Girl from Petrovka, that he'd been looking for all day. Now, that is essentially his version, but there is another version, slightly different version, and I heard the actual story from George Pfeiffer, who is the novelist. So that is one story about a book. And what I do in the book is to take all coincidence stories that I had ever heard of and classify them into 10 different classes. And then take a good representative of each of the classes. So you have 10 stories now. Instead of hundreds of stories. You now have 10. This is what mathematicians do, by the way. You know, they classify things. I mean, if I were really worried about dealing with, let's say, the whole numbers, all of those numbers, I might not be interested in all of the numbers. I can't visualize all the numbers, really, but I can visualize, let's say, the numbers that are multiples of 3. And what do I do when I have multiples of 3? I only think of 3. And then I might think of 3n. And so I have all of the multiples of 3. There are an infinite number of them, since I can't visualize them. But that's exactly what I do in the stories. So I'm actually taking the 10 stories as representatives of 10 classes of stories. Now, there's another story also about a book.
Well, can I stop? So wasn't the book he found the book that belonged to the author?
That's right.
Incredibly unlikely, right?
Incredibly unlikely.
Right.
2 years later, he's on the movie set, and George Pfeiffer is there. And Anthony Hopkins comes up to George Pfeiffer, and he said, you know, I found a book that, you know, he tells him the story. And George said, did the book have red markings on all of the British words that were, all the American words that could be translated into British spellings? And Hopkins said, yes, and it turns out to be George's book. So there's it's a kind of a second part of that particular story.
And what class of coincidence is that?
It's a whole class of coincidences that are of searching for things and then finding them in very unexpected places. And that's a whole class of stories that.
And then there's the Anne Parrish story.
There's an Anne Parrish story. Anne Parrish was a children's book writer in the early 20th century. She and her husband, Charles Corliss, were vacationing in Paris. She lives in Philadelphia, or she lived in Philadelphia at that time. She was born in Colorado. She's in Paris. The two of them are sipping wine in Dumago, and she wanders, while her husband's still sipping wine, she wanders over to the Seine, about 8 minutes walk, and she rummages through the bookstalls, finds a book called Jack Frost and Other Stories, and she is so delighted with this. She buys it for a franc, runs to her husband and says, this was my favorite book when I was a child. And he opens the book and sees on the first few pages a scribbling of a child's handwriting. And it's the address of Anne Frank. Whenever I tell this story, by the way, my spine tingles. I have to tell you that it really is spine tingling. Because it is another one of those really rare things that happen, but it does happen. Now,
what are the odds of that? So when something really unlikely happens,
it is unlikely.
How should we interpret that?
Okay, there are two ways of interpreting it. One is, if I'm thinking in retrospect that it is this person, Anne Parrish, and I'm going to label a person who is going to, that a particular coincidence is going to happen to, and then figure out the odds, you get a very unlikely odds. In other words, the odds are extremely against it happening. It's extraordinarily against it happening. But what if you ask it a slightly different way? What if you say, what are the odds of somebody coming to Paris from America and finding in a bookstore a book that belonged to that person as a child? You get a different sort of odds now, because now you have to say, well, there are a lot of people who are traveling. A lot of people have books. A lot of people have, find books from their childhood. And I think it happens very often, in fact, there are many of these coincidences that once you drop the retrospective idea, that is, you're taking it as a big global world of people and events that happen. So, you know, we have 7 billion people in this world, and so much time is passing by, and so many events are colliding. It's bound to happen. I'm suggesting that, in fact, these things are happening all the time. We just don't hear the stories. But once we hear the stories, they become magnificent. So the stories are really what I want to focus on, but it is, the odds are different it depends on how you ask the question.
So as a mathematician, do you have to take into account, so Anne Parrish goes to the book stalls, she finds a book that has, she doesn't realize it until she takes it back to her husband, it has her name and her home address from when she was a little girl in Colorado, right?
Mm-hmm,
I mean,
that's
so,
right.
so can you mathematically represent all the other people who shopped in those book stalls who didn't find a book from their childhood?
That's the point.
And,
I think
and,
that
I mean,
is part of the point.
There's that famous, is it Richard Feynman who said, "You're never going to believe what happened to me this morning." And the person goes, "What?" He goes, "Absolutely nothing." You know. So, and it isn't so that we focus on the anomalies, and of course we don't calculate every other thing that happened in this world of 7 billion people. So a lot of it is there's 7 billion people all doing stuff.
That's right.
That you would expect close to a certainty that on any given day, something unbelievably bizarre and coincidental would happen.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
That's correct. It's absolutely correct, and it's all in the noticing. That's the point. But now if you look at these stories, and you really want to know why they happen, whenever you're told a story, you're only told the shell of the story. You're really told the shell of it. The storyteller does not really tell you the ingredients that are going to give you the connections that will happen in order to make that story come true. So for example, you know, I always think of these things when I start to analyze one of these stories, and believe me, I've got over 450 of these stories and emails and all sorts of things that are coming at me. I'm the repository of coincidence stories, and I get them every day now. And what people are asking me to do is, what you just asked me to do, is to analyze them. Well, here's what you have to think about. The story is in a shell. I think of it as in a Russian troika doll, and you have to open the first doll to see the next doll. The problem with this is that this is usually in Russian troika dolls, there are only a finite number of nested dolls. In many of these stories, especially the fabulous coincidence stories, the number is infinite. I mean, you don't know when you've gotten to the last troika doll. And what I mean by that is, I can take, for example, I can take the Anne Parrish story and try to break that down. And if you think about, I did mention that Charles Corliss was her husband. And you'd think when the storyteller first tells you that, well, what does that mean? Does that mean anything, Charles Corliss? It turns out that it does. It really does. And what it means is that if you look and try to find out who Charles Corliss is, he's a very rich man. And he has to be a really rich man. How many people in 1927 could just take off? Remember, there's no air flights to Paris. You can't fly to Paris.
Well, Lindbergh did. Didn't he?
No commercial flights before 1939. None. So you had to go by boat. That's the only way. Or balloon, maybe, but that would take longer, I think. Okay. So you have to go by boat. Now you think, what does that have to do with the story? Well, what it does have to do is, the question is, how did they get to Paris? And what would it be like for somebody in her economic position to go to Paris? She's going for a vacation. She's actually, she's going to have to spend at least a month, possibly 2 months in traveling. That's different than the way we travel. So she's there for a long time. That may not have been the first time she was rummaging through the stalls, and she's going through a lot of different sequences. It turns out that she's gone every other year. I looked this up in Ship Manifest. She and her husband went every other year to Paris. That's what people in that class, that economic class, did. You could go to Greece, you could go to Paris, but you didn't go to many other places. So if
it changes the denominator, right?
It changes the denominator, but there are more ingredients. Okay. So for example, when you start to take the next doll out, you find that her mother, whose name was also Anne, happened to be a painter who was in school with Mary Cassatt. Now, Mary Cassatt is a very well-known Impressionist painter. She was young at the time when she went to school in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, and they were very close friends at the time. So there's another little ingredient, 2 close friends. Okay, well, Mary spends the rest of her life at a very young age, in her 20s, in Paris. She comes back and forth because she's also very wealthy. These are wealthy people. And she comes back and forth. Right. She's very close to her mother. She dies in 1927, 2 years before Anne Parish finds the book. I suspect that the book seemed to travel within the family line. It went from her mother to Mary Cassatt, and Mary Cassatt, when she died, her estate was just, people just didn't know what to do with books. You give it to Paris Bookstall or Shakespeare and Company, the only 2 bookstores in Paris that had any English books. Right. So, you start to unravel these things, you find you connect the dots. You're connecting the dots all along. And when you start to connect the dots, each of those dots has an odd. In other words, you can attach a probability to each of those dots. And once you do, all you have to do is multiply all those probabilities together. You get some kind of an odds as to how likely the story would happen. Right.
So, but still not inevitable that it was going to happen, but not as insanely unlikely. So we'll talk about, if you would, the story of Joan Ginther, who won the lottery 4 times.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm going to go out.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you that I believe there are many people who win the lottery 4 times. How's
Really?
that?
Okay.
I'm not surprised, and I'll tell you why. Now, before I tell you why, I have to sort of say, don't get me wrong. I don't want to kill all these stories. These stories are wonderful. They're beautiful stories. And so I hate putting numbers on stories. And that's not the point here. The point is when you're talking about coincidences, you have to think about the definition of coincidence. What is the definition of a coincidence? Definition is, for me, it's events colliding in space and time that have a surprise, but no apparent cause. So that's very, that makes it clear.
Is it the same thing as a fluke, or is that different?
It's a little different than a fluke. A fluke,
Okay.
The cause is a little bit more apparent. I mean, it just happened, and then you find it, and you see what is that apparent cause. You can analyze that cause. But here, once you know the cause, it's no longer a coincidence, because
Right.
it's causal. Right. But when I say apparent cause, that word apparent is kind of a little vague, because you have to say apparent to whom? Some scientists might know the cause, but you don't see the cause. So you have to think of it that way. Now, when you're talking about Joan Ginther winning the lottery 4 times, there you can actually put the odds to it. I mean, you know what the odds of winning the lottery is. That the lottery people give you the odds. Did she buy a lot of
lottery tickets? Did she buy like a million lottery tickets?
We don't know that, but we do know that she was a mathematician from Stanford That might help, but I'm not sure it does. There are ways of cheating the lottery. There are a few.
Can you tell us now? But we want to hear that, actually. Yes.
Well, I'll tell you in a minute. I'll
Okay.
tell you one way, anyhow. The first time she won the lottery, she won $5 million. Now, anybody winning the lottery $5 million, and I've studied this actually from one of my other books on gambling, when you win $5 million, that's house money. When it's house money, you feel free to use it the way you want. What are you going to do? You want to win again. That's a high. Winning $5 million is such a high for some people. You win $5 million, she's going to bet like crazy. She's going to spend a couple of years, dumping her cash this way and that. And I'm sure she put possibly $1 million, possibly $2 million back into the lottery. So she wins again. Now her odds are terrific to get it.
Did she quit her job as a mathematics professor?
I don't know. I tried to interview her. She is very reclusive. I cannot. Yeah.
So she goes back in, she reloads, and then she wins 3 more times.
3 more times. Second time, I think it was $2 million, and next time it was $3 million, and then the fourth time it was $10 million.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, the last 3, I have to say, were scratch-offs. So now there's a little difference, because with a scratch-off, there are some techniques. You wait. There's a certain waiting technique. You wait until you know that somebody has not won a certain number in a certain area, because these scratch-offs they're on little cards that have been printed in advance, and they're being handed out not quite randomly, because that's another topic. There's nothing random in the world, really. So
I think that's the point of the book, actually.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. That's right.
Or everything's random. I mean, there's
random.
There's no true luck.
There's
no
true
force of luck.
Well, now you're getting into something that's much tougher for me when you talk about luck.
Are some people just lucky? Okay. I interrupted you. You keep going on the lottery.
You want to talk about luck? It's fine. I can talk about luck. Luck is a different kind of position. Most people think of luck as something that is an object. You take a rabbit's foot. That's an object. It's a symbol of luck, and it's kind of a representative of luck. You're representing luckness. If you fail with you fail to be lucky with your rabbit's foot, there's a lot of blame to go around, because, a rabbit's foot, to be really truly lucky with a rabbit's foot, it has to be from a rabbit that was caught in a cemetery, and it has to be the left foot of the rabbit. People may not know this, but it is true.
Who knew
Why
that?
the left foot?
No one knew that. No, yeah.
Well, the left foot, because sinistra is, the Latin or the Italian word for leftness, which, of course, is also our word for sinister. So there's this leftness that is it's in the equation. And the reason it's in the equation is because if for some reason that rabbit's foot didn't work to give you that luck, you blame it on the cemetery. Oh, it wasn't found in the cemetery. Oh, I better get a different rabbit's foot. So that's built into the whole thing. It's beautifully built in. I think it's great.
So let me ask you, so in our lives, we're constantly calculating the odds of things. We do risk analysis all the time. Is it safe to get on that airplane? Should I worry about an asteroid hitting the Earth? Should I how do I think about global warming or the risk? I mean, I hate to bring this up, the risk of a mad person charging into a workplace, whatever. How does mathematics help us make sense of the world?
It's risk is primordial. I mean, it's a question of, do I leave the cave Because, do I leave it now? I don't know if there's some saber-toothed tiger around the corner that's going to just have me for lunch. And so there is that riskiness of just leaving the cave. So it's within us. We just have been like that for, millennia. For many, many thousands of years, we have developed that feeling of being cautious about things, and we know that the risk is all around us. We feel that. But to answer your question about the mathematics, yes, the mathematics comes from about the 17th century mathematics on already risk analysis. So that's there. I mean, we can have some kind of a connection between what is real in the world, what's happening really in the world, and what we can actually do as a mathematically modeling that. And there is this connection. It's not exact, by the way. I mean, you can't predict things totally by mathematics, but you can get a handle on it.
But why didn't evolution and natural selection make us better at math? I mean, like, we're good at a lot of things, but I don't think you have an equation in this book for about 50 pages almost, because it'll scare the readers.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So I mean, we're not instinctively great at math. Why is that?
You're asking the wrong person to answer that.
Well, you spend your life trying to make us better at it, right?
Sure. I understand the question. I don't understand the answer.
All right. Well, we're going to go to questions here in a few minutes. Let's talk about another one of your stories, which is many people here know the one about Abraham Lincoln. This was actually in the movie, the recent movie by Spielberg.
It's a true story.
The Abraham Lincoln had this dream shortly before he was assassinated, where he, I guess, walks down a hall and he sees everyone in mourning, and there's I guess a coffin or something, and they say the president has been assassinated. He had that dream shortly before it actually happened.
Yeah.
So talk to us sort of from a mathematician standpoint. Was he being clairvoyant, or is this something that has a high level of probability?
We all have dreams that, and we have many of them. We have a lifetime of dreams. Many of them we don't remember. Many of them we don't wake up and we don't think we've dreamt. But there's so many dreams that we've had as a collection of people. And you have to think about the whole idea of how many of those dreams actually come true to us and how many do not. Now, that's a significant one. He's a president. He was a president. He had this dream of his own assassination. It's a wonderful story, by the way. It's been documented many times. But I suspect, I'm just going to go out on a limb here, but I suspect that almost every president has a dream like that. I suspect there's a fear of being assassinated. There's got to be.
Right.
And so I'm just going to suspect that every president has a dream. Every important person who has some kind of a risk, some risk that is happening, is going to have a dream, and it doesn't happen. But sometimes it does happen. So that's the equation. That's what you have to look at.
And we have sort of a hindsight bias of locking on to the ones where there's an apparent causality or clairvoyance, and we ignore the other ones.
That's right. I mean, we know it because he was assassinated, and now we can retrofit it to the mathematics if you want.
This is really a crazy out there question, but I'm not being paid for this, so I'm going to go. I'm just.
Neither am I.
Not being paid, so we're just going to wing it. So, what are the odds that we're here? Okay, what I mean by that is, that intelligence was one of these adaptive traits that emerged from evolution, which emerged from 3.5 or 4 billion years of evolution on Earth. I mean, have you ever kind of looked at that, like the odds of...
Well, the odds of being here right now is 1 minus the odds of our not being here.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
That I do?
Does anyone understand that? Okay.
I mean, I'm serious about this because, once you do that, when you ask, what are the odds of this happening? You have to also ask, what are the odds of it not happening? I actually got this question from somebody when I was doing a reading. And, and he said, you're talking about coincidences, and you're talking about the odds of coincidence happening. But isn't the thing that doesn't happen also a coincidence? So there was, and it struck me that, this guy's right. It is. It's coincidence. Because if I don't know the apparent cause of the coincidence, because that's what the definition of a coincidence is, then surely I don't know the apparent cause of the coincidence not happening. Because if I did know the apparent cause of the coincidence not happening, then I would know the cause of the coincidence, and then there wouldn't be any coincidence. So that's the logic of it.
But isn't like almost anything totally unlikely at some level? I mean, like the fact that we're even here, I mean, that seems really improbable to me. Increasingly so, actually, each passing minute. How did we wind up here? Like mathematically, how did that happen? It's still the one minus of not happening.
That question, are you?
No, okay.
No, sorry.
Well, I mean, actually, no, there's a big debate. There's a big debate in the field of paleobiology, where Stephen Jay Gould said that if you rewound the tape of evolution, went back 600 million years, and then ran it forward again, you would not wind up with us because so many improbable things had to happen for us to be here. I mean, do you agree with that?
I think Stephen was not around when the alternate universe theories came about, really, and seriously came about. So we can talk about alternate universes in the same light. And then we're talking about, we're talking some serious physics there. But
you like quantum mechanics?
Yeah.
Well, tell us about that. So there's that Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. I mean, from a mathematician standpoint, does that tell us that we...
Well, James Gleek just gave a lecture on the time machine, right? Or going back in time. I wasn't at the lecture, but I couldn't get in when I tried to get in. But maybe if I go back to his lecture that happened 2 hours ago, maybe I'll get in again. But anyhow, yeah, I mean, it's a question of interfering with, with the event itself. So you're interfering with the event. The Heisenberg question you're asking is, you want to look at something, and the fact that you're looking at something actually disturbs the something. So how do you actually examine something in a real detail? You're interfering with something that's already happened and something that exists. So there's something, could I undo a coincidence, for example? Which is, I think, what you're asking. Can I undo a coincidence by the fact that we are here and we're existing and we're all together in this room? Can I actually reduplicate that if I went back in time and just rewound the thing? And I mean, Stephen King's wonderful novel, what is it, 11/22/63, is fabulous for that. I mean, there's the answer if you've ever read Stephen King's book. It's just amazing to think that, what he does seem to know the answer to that.
Well, I think we should take some questions. They should be as mind-blowing as possible, clearly. All right, and please phrase them in the form of an equation. So how do you want to do this? Should I just? Okay. All right.
You have people with microphones?
Yeah, come to the microphones. Yeah, but it's a little blindness, so it's hard to see. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So I think it's a bit silly question, but it's you as a scientist. What do you think about all those like pop psychology books that like Secret that tell us that if we like truly believe in something, somehow we will like make it happen? So can we like provoke those flukes, like make those, I don't know, like by focusing on something? Like, do you think it's totally ridiculous, or is there actually some maybe matter to it? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And the book talks a little bit about that, in fact. The question, the way I interpret it, is, there is, you can think something is going to happen, and you're forcing it to happen in some way. But imagine it's possible that your thinking is connected to something about noticing. So a lot of coincidences that happen to us just seem to happen because we notice these things more. Many of us don't seem to find coincidence. Coincidences don't happen to us, let's say. But if we actually notice, we'll find that they actually do happen to us. So just forcing yourself to think, well, that's, I think, is exactly the same as just turning up the dial to your noticing dial, to make it a little bit more perceptive and sharp. So you're actually being much sharper when you're noticing. And I think these things will happen.
How does Satan, God, or maybe Zeus affect one's perception of coincidence?
How's that? What? Sorry.
How does Satan, God, or maybe Zeus comes into the experience of coincidence?
Yeah, I wish I could answer that. If I could, I'd be a famous author, I think. But I think that's something I toyed with getting into, and I realized that that's something that's kind of dangerous to get into, and I didn't want to move in that direction. But I think that there is something to that, in fact.
Yes, thank you for coming. I had a question. You said earlier that you'd categorized events into 10 categories. And I'm interested in knowing what some of the 10 categories are and how you did that characterization of putting the events into these 10 bins.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Well, the Joan Ginther story is one of them. That's about gambling. So all the coincidences of gambling are in that category. The lost book, or the book that was retrieved by Anne Parish, is another category. It's things that somehow appear from a distant past. The Anthony Hopkins story is another category. They don't totally intersect, those two stories, although they're both about books and they're both, there's some similarities. Many of these categories do intersect a little bit. And what I found is, after I wrote the book, and I had so many people coming to me and writing me stories, this is what happened, actually. The BBC interviewed me for my British edition of the book. And the producer said, we'd like to put on our website and Twitter feed the question to you, a question to our friends, could you analyze the stories that they will send us? And I said, sure. Now, I didn't realize this is the BBC. So the producer came back with 10,000 stories. I said, look, I'll do 4 of them. And I was flooded with stories. It was terrific to have them. But, and what I found was that the news stories were trying to be outside the 10 classes that I had already decided were the extremes of all classes of stories. And, I think there are maybe 11 or 12 classes now, which I didn't think of. I mean, I just got one yesterday or the day before. A guy lost a wallet on the Staten Island ferry, just overboard. I don't know how you lose a wallet overboard. And he said, a fisherman friend of his, 6 months later, on Cape Cod, found his wallet. Now, that is a category all by itself. But you know, once you get all these stories, you have to be very careful about putting it into a nonfiction book. So I have to vet those stories. They really, I mean, I didn't know this person. How do I make sure that's true? It's such a wonderful story. It's such a almost impossible story. But yet, you know, you have to vet these because it's a nonfiction book. So there are other categories that I had not even thought about.
Before we go to the next question, a question that's been rattling around my head for a while is, so we're coming to this age of self-driving cars, which statistically we're told will be much safer, but I like to have my hands on a wheel, you know? I mean, I like to be driving myself. So although I know rationally that it's better if the car drives itself, you know, do I trust those algorithms in there? And I mean, you know, isn't it human nature not to really trust the math entirely because it's different from me? You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but let's say this. If you were to be asked to be an astronaut to go to the moon, would you trust the thrusters of that rocket ship that's going to bring you to the moon?
I'd question the management at NASA.
Yeah, you might, but you'd have to have that trust.
Yeah.
Because you're not driving that thing.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
But that, well, now you're being rational again. All right, let's go. Okay.
I don't mean to make this the religious question line, but when you're talking about probability, chance, and as you brought up, we're here, you have all these probabilities. How is that possible? You had said you had gotten to points where you thought about God or spiritual influence, and I was curious about how far you went with that, considering the last maybe 150 years there's a drought of religion and science. So yeah, that was my question.
It's something I have thought about, and I confess that there are things that we just don't know. I mean, there are a lot of things that we do not know. I mean, if you think of what the future has for us, it's very hard to predict the future. I mean, 50 years ago, would we have thought that we could just all have cell phones anywhere we go? I mean, that's, you know, that kind of thing is just so foreign, and we just wouldn't know that there's actually some kind of a, you know, an action at a distance that gives everybody in this room a telephone number, and they can all have cell phones in their pockets. I mean, that's something that's so extraordinary. Yeah. Why is it extraordinary? Well, because I don't see any attachments to these things. I mean, I don't see the connections. But how do we know that our heads aren't really doing something together? It's possible, and I'm not saying this is, you know, with any conviction here, but I am saying that we do have electromagnetic fields running around in our heads, or just at the top of my head. I mean, I can't feel it, but I think that there is an electromagnetic field. I mean, we are chemical electric
I can
circuitry.
Feel it.
You can feel it.
I can feel it.
But he has hair.
Yeah, but this close to him, I mean, it's radiating. I think we have to wrap this up in a second. You know, you already did your book signing, right?
I'm going to do a book signing, yes.
What time is the book signing? 6:30. Okay, you're doing a book signing. I think we have time for one last question, and then we'll maybe linger around, and Joe will talk to people afterwards for a few minutes. Last question.
If I may comment about why people may not be better at math or risk analysis in particular, is that obviously humans are risk takers, and that has obvious advantages. If Lindbergh knew the real odds of his surviving the flight to Paris, he wouldn't have done it. Oh, God. But my real question has to do with the scratch-off tickets. And what is it about the printing and things that allows you to win? Okay.
Oh.
You never told us.
Well, it is a bit complicated, and I really can't. There are schemes. All I can say is there are schemes where you adjust the timing of your buying the ticket to the place of buying the ticket, because you would know how many of those tickets were already bought and how many people have not won so far. And the people who have won, you know what they won, because there are gradations in the winnings. So there are techniques and algorithms. They're not really algorithms. They're just sort of rational smarts that you have to figure out when to buy the ticket, for a scratch-off, that is, and where to buy the ticket. But that's a lot of work to be done, because you have to do a lot of analysis of where all those 7-Elevens are that you can buy those tickets from. This doesn't only go from one little locale. It has to be from different places in a state and different states. So it's a very broad thing you could do.
Do you play the lottery?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not play the lottery.
question.
I bought one ticket in my whole life, only one ticket, and the reason was when I wrote the book on gambling, I wanted to know what a ticket looked like.
All right. The book is Fluke. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you, Joel.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.